Hello and welcome back to F1 Every Week. My name is Ben Wevel, and today I'm going to break down the reasoning behind Lewis Hamilton's bid to purchase Chelsea Football Club, among other pieces of F1 news. You can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and more, linked below. Now, without further ado, let's get into episode 55. This week, 7-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton revealed his intentions to buy Chelsea Football Club from current owner Roman Abramovich, whose ownership has led Chelsea to 5 Premier League titles, 5 FA Cups and 2 Champions League titles since the purchase in 2003. But why is Abramovich being forced to sell? Well, the Russian billionaire also happens to be an oligarch with very close ties to Vladimir Putin. And he put the club up for sale in March due to the fallout after the invasion of Ukraine, being seized by the United Kingdom government due to sanctions against the Russian businessman. American company Rain was tasked with the role of selling the club, and there are currently 3 parties vying for the Blues, being the Ricketts family, who are worth $3.4 billion and are owners of the MLB franchise the Chicago Cubs, Todd Boehly, worth $4.7 billion, and a third consortium led by Sir Martin Broughton, of which Lewis is a member, alongside the likes of Serena Williams. However, the reason why this bid to purchase Chelsea is puzzling is his support of bitter London rivals, Arsenal. Well, Lewis does in fact have some affiliation with the Stamford Bridge-based team, his uncle, a Chelsea fan, having taken him to matches as a boy. In an interview this week, Lewis expressed his gratitude and surprise at being able to participate in the purchase of such a successful club. But the question still remains about why he is actually doing this. Hamilton has been known to get involved with many charitable organisations, such as the founding of the Hamilton Commission, and these, as well as the possible purchase of Chelsea, are likely to align with Hamilton's wish to create a number of opportunities for himself after his Formula One career comes to a close, which may not be so far away. From further interviews with Hamilton, it is clear that his goal is to slowly negate the substantial losses made over the span of the COVID-19 pandemic, which were only amplified due to the sanctions imposed on the club, which involved the freezing of the club as an asset, as well as cutting off ticket, broadcasting and merchandise profits. On the other hand, it is clear from the comparatively minimal contribution of £10 million from both Williams and Hamilton, that they are less part of the consortium to aid the club's purchase, but merely to gloss up its image as celebrities pitching in, which is perhaps a reason for the group's shortlisting as bidders in the first place. But what influence will Hamilton have if he does end up helping purchase the team? As we know from his endeavours in F1, Lewis is a voice for diversity, so he is likely to help head a plethora of diversity campaigns in this sport as well. Both his and Serena's presence will add a layer of plausibility to any operation put forward by the Broughton administration. Not only are his efforts praised by members of the F1 community, but Chelsea manager Thomas Tuchel has also recently been jubilant about his work. And it is clear that, if Hamilton is to aid the purchase of Chelsea, he will be embraced as a co-owner. News from Max Verstappen next, who has achieved the title of 2022 Laureus Sportsman of the Year, the accolade shared with only 3 other F1 drivers since its inception in 2000. He joins Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel and joint 2020 Laureus Sportsman of the Year Lewis Hamilton on the list, the latter of whom he beat in the 2021 world title, the incident which earned Max this prestigious award. Verstappen came up against the likes of Tom Brady, 7-time Super Bowl victor, Bayern Munich star Robert Lewandowski, and 20-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic in his bid to clinch the award, later stating that it had been a special yet hectic year, and that he couldn't have done it without the team of people behind him. There were other figures of motorsport mastery present at the awards night as well, Mercedes being beaten out by the Italian football team of the year in the Team of the Year category for their Euro 2020 victory against England, as well as Marc Marquez, 6-time MotoGP winner, just missing out in the Comeback of the Year section. To all of the winners and nominees, congratulations, but especially to the reigning world champion Max Verstappen. But despite his heroic victory in the dying stages of the 2021 season, he is already struggling somewhat with his car's reliability in 2022. Will Max be felled once again by Red Bull powertrains, or will he repeat his victory in Italy last week? Tune in next Sunday for the Miami race review to find out. Next up this week, let's discuss sprint races as a phenomenon. After a number of years with the sprint race style weekend on the cards, it was confirmed by F1 that, for the 2021 season, 3 races would be used to trial this new formula, in which, instead of the normal qualifying session, drivers would instead complete a 100-kilometre dash to set the grid for Sunday, the podium finishers in this race being awarded points, meaning 2 races in the weekend. Despite criticism of the weekend format from fans and drivers alike, George Russell stating that after last weekend's sprint at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, he's not a fan, and that elongating the sprint so that drivers may have to manage their tyres would be a positive tweak, the FIA have remained deaf to all of it, and 2022 will see 2 more sprint races this season, Austria and Brazil. The main change for the season being that points will be allocated to the top 8 instead of merely the front 3. But 3 sprints seems unlikely to be the limit for the FIA, as rumours have circled in the past few weeks, which can note that there are going to be more on the horizon for 2023. The rationale behind the expansion of the sprint races was clearly put by F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali last weekend, who said that he was concerned about F1 becoming an old white man's sport, and that the extra action would help capture the interest of the younger demographic, something that F1 has prioritised after the removal of Bernie Ecclestone from his position as chief executive of Formula One in 2016. The former Ferrari CEO even went so far as to compare the sprint to streaming services and YouTube compilations. The main issue that F1 purists are somewhat irritated about in terms of the sprint race is the lack of necessity for strategy decisions or tyre management, which, for some, reduces the emphasis on F1 as a team sport, as the only real decisions made are up to the drivers themselves. In my opinion, F1 needs to be careful that, in pandering to the young audience, they do not lose their decades-long faithful. And after a meeting between teams and F1 management took place in London, where the increase of sprint races saw unanimous approvals from the teams, some more sprint races for next season seemed imminent. However, when the FIA were consulted about this view, they were once more unwilling to budge. FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem apparently demanding a financial endowment from teams before he would even consider the proposal, which indicates that, like many of the decisions by the FIA, greed will be the deciding factor. In a statement afterwards, the FIA stated that they will be evaluating the impact of this proposal, but for now, sprint races are staying put. New innovations such as the sprint weekends are part of what is making F1 so interesting and yet so tense. After nearly a decade of the same story, 2022 is proving that it will induce change on an unprecedented level. Porpoising has been an issue for most teams so far this season, which came about as a result of the 2022 ground effect cars, with many still unable to find a solution to this bouncy issue, which, in pre-season tests, damaged floors and drivers alike. However, some teams have been able to somewhat alleviate the effects of the porpoising, such as McLaren, for whom the phenomenon is hardly noticeable. But Mercedes is still afflicted with the issue, which proved to be particularly potent at the most recent race, the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. George Russell cited after the Grand Prix that the bouncing took his breath away, and that he was struggling with chest and back pains due to the porpoising. Although the Brit did reveal that when the car and the tyres are in the right window, the car feels really good to drive, and with major upgrades set to make an appearance in the following race in Miami, George may not be in pain for much longer. Despite F1 having just experienced a massive and sweeping regulations change, some teams are already looking forward to 2026, a year in which even more changes have been promised, with 5 targets having been set by the FIA after the opening few rounds of the new era of F1, the first of which being the improvement of following in a race. The 2022 regs were designed to give cars more of a chance to make overtakes, with the percentage of dirty air coming off the back of the car in front being greatly reduced this year, which helps the following car go for the move. Therefore, it is necessary that this progress is maintained, or even better, built upon for the 2026 regulation overhaul. And the huge amount of data that will be collected in the next 4 seasons is sure to provide answers to some of the remaining issues in what Ross Brawn dubs as raceability. A second target for the FIA for 2026 is to reduce drag, which will be especially important seeing as there is likely to be a loss of horsepower between the current engines and those of the 2026 season. As F1 is slowly making the switch to 100% renewable energy, power is going to be lost, which makes it critical that drag on the car is toned down for 2026. The third target is to reduce the size and weight of the cars, which has both been on a steady upwards trajectory for the past decade, the minimum weight increasing by nearly 200 kilograms since 2009, partly down to new additions on the car such as the Halo. But the length of the car has increased as drastically as well. A 2009 Honda boasting a modest length of just over 4.6 metres, while the 2019 Ferrari was a behemoth in comparison, at 5.7 metres. Despite a shortening of the cars for this year, this is the first time in which the FIA have formalised the reduction of size and weight as a clear objective. The fourth objective for the 2026 season is to increase sustainability. The FIA introduced their first major cost cap for the 2021 season, and as well as tightening the grid, the FIA reasoned that this will reduce waste, as well as the environmental impacts of an F1 race. This, as well as the use of renewable fuel and their goal to become carbon neutral by 2030, is making a clear statement of intent, which will be supported by all teams in their efforts as cost-effective businesses. And finally is safety improvements. This is not new to F1 by any stretch, as we are constantly reminded of the necessity of safety in the severely dangerous sport. Just take the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix, in which Romain Grosjean nearly perished in a fiery crash, or the death of Antoine Hubert only a year prior in Spa in F2. But what is notable is the wording of this objective, as the FIA outlines their wish to move towards active and connected safety systems. The FIA is eager in this new generation of the sport to introduce measures such as automated warning systems on the dash, or even actual intervention measures. But I don't think that we're likely to see Tesla-style automated braking on cars anytime soon. Thank you for listening to F1 Every Week. Tune in next Sunday for the Miami race review, and have a lovely rest of your weekend. Thank you.